What's up, guys? We are back with another Masters of the Universe Masterverse review, jumping back into the deluxe subline and more of that new ETERNIA stuff. So we're taking a look at the most recent deluxe figure. We've got our new Beastman here. So this is another instance of them kind of going the Mark Taylor design route. This very much has that leaning when it comes to Beastman. This is also more of a Skelegod kind of deluxe figure rather than, say, Faker or Triclops or any of the characters that have like different outfits. This is just a bigger figure. He does happen to have outfits, sort of, but he's in that same kind of packaging that Skelegod comes with more so than the others. Speaking of, it is still very much our normal packaging. So figure in the window, you've got that really weird trapezoidal, diamondy kind of shape. You've got all those Eternian hieroglyphs all over, new Eternia logo down there on the front, and then the back and the side have some fantastic artwork from Nate Barch with a bio of Beastman, as well as a cross-sell for some of the upcoming stuff that just recently went up for pre-order. So let's do it. Let's pull them out and take a look. And here we go, out of the package, our Masterverse new Eternia Beastman. You know, again, this guy is definitely taking inspiration from the old Mark Taylor designs. You know, he's definitely a new thing, but he's very Mark Taylor inspired from some of the original you know, character designs. There was one where he was almost like Chewbacca-esque. This gives me that feeling, but there's also the original Beastman design, and it's kind of like a mesh of both, really. So there's a lot of cool stuff going on here. Arguably, probably one of the better figures in the entire line, as far as I'm concerned, as well, because not only is he massive, he's, as far as I can tell, like 100% unique, and he has a lot of different variety when it comes to how you want to display him. Because, of course, he can just be a Beastman if you want, but then you can have him armored, you can have him with all this fur, all kinds of crazy options, really. So let's see what he can do, see how he moves around. I'm going to start by taking this off. As cool as it is, it's kind of weird because it does tend to just sort of fall off of him because it doesn't exactly cinch down or anything, it just sits on his head. So just to avoid it falling off, we're going to take it off for now. We've got a head that can look up really, really far, kind of like a Howl at the Moon kind of thing. He can't really look down too far, though, because, of course, you know, his head is kind of oblong shape. You've got, well, you can pop it off. You've got a little bit of side-to-side tilt, not a whole lot, like it's, you know, a little bit of bobble. And then you've got rotation, but, of course, his head is jutting out forward, so rotation is kind of weird. Arms out at the shoulder. They rotate all the way around. You really don't have to worry about the fur getting in the way. It's very, you know, free-flowing, if that makes sense. We've got a bicep swivel there. We've got double-jointed elbows. And he's got pretty good range. Not really too much to worry about there. You've got the armor, but it's not exactly in the way either on either the bicep or the wrist. We've got our rotation, and you've got hinges at the wrist also. Now, this arm right here is going to have, you know, a little bit of problem with this bracer, with this gauntlet. This one, it's because he's got a very asymmetrical design. He's not going to have any kind of real issues there. Even this thing doesn't really get in the way as far as moving that around. We've got our very Masterverse style torso here. This thing, you know, I'm still not the biggest fan of this because it doesn't really do a whole lot. So, you know, he's got this harness and it doesn't really stop him from moving. So you can bobble him up and down. And it does allow for some tilt. It's pretty decent. And then you've got your waist rotation down there. Now this is still like a diaphragm cut, sort of. But the internals of it don't really allow it to be much more than sort of a bobble. It's not exactly a second swivel, so it doesn't really allow for any extra degree of motion there. Legs go out pretty far. Kick forward a decent bit, you know, despite that big loincloth piece here that is plastic, it still moves nicely. Kick backwards a little bit, thigh cut. You've got your double jointed knees. Pinless, you know, again, just like every other figure in this line. He does have some straps on the back of the armor, so that is going to get in the way a little bit, but he still has pretty decent range. And then we've got a shin swivel down here. And then you've got a really good rocker, nothing in the way there. And then you've got hinges down at those ankles, which do work pretty nicely. There's a pretty good degree of range when it comes to that. So he's pretty well articulated. Like he's very similar to Skelegod in many ways when it comes to how he moves around, how he's constructed, his size, and all of that kind of stuff. But these figures are all essentially kind of the same, especially the males. Specifically, the male figures are all essentially the same kind of thing through and through, depending on what they happen to be wearing. And even though he has a whole bunch of stuff on him, none of it really gets in the way. So outside of the fact that I'm still not the biggest fan of that torso cut, because I wish it could do more because it looks like it can, he does move pretty well for being such a massive figure. Where I think this guy really shines, though, is not necessarily just the aesthetics at face value, it's the variety when it comes to what you can do with him. Because, well, this is how he comes in the box, but you could take all of this armor off if you want. I don't expect I'm ever going to do that because I really like him this way. But if you wanted just a naked Beastman, you can do that, save for the loincloth. If you want to have, a more vintagey inspired Beastman, or, dare I say, a more very MOTU Classics style Beastman, we get armor for that also. So you can change up his appearance, but he's no less massive. And that's really what I like. One of my biggest complaints, I think, with the first Beastman we got is that version of Beastman is relatively scrawny. So his figure is relatively scrawny as a result. And I kind of made a point of mentioning it in the Stinkor review that those two share almost all their parts. Like, they're essentially the same figure. And it was pretty clear after getting this guy that the point of that Beastman was to allow them to also make Stinkor. They clearly were meant to be used as reuse, as shared parts. This figure is entirely different. This is its own thing. This is a huge hulking Beastman. I'm not really sure what they're going to do in terms of reuse on this guy, but I'm curious to see what might come of it, because I'm really liking these parts, this size, the overall kind of monstrous lanky nature of this guy really works. There are a couple little things about him, one kind of big thing, I suppose, that I'm not the biggest fan of, but overwhelmingly, this is a really cool Beastman figure. It has a lot of everything, really. So, it very much has the furry nature of it, like I mentioned from that, Chewbacca-esque Beastman design. It's got these sort of weird spines on the armor. This armor piece is from that Chewbacca design in many ways, but the other Beastman design kind of has this sort of thing as well. A lot of this other armor all over it, and it's still very much a Beastman. There is a lot of paint on this figure. Like, he's absolutely covered in a wash. Maybe too much, like it may be a little bit too heavy-handed, but for the most part, I think it's pretty good. We will talk about the big thing here in a second that I wish was changed, but it does have to do with paint and coloring in many ways also. But I think overall, sculpt, sizing, and just the overall proportioning of this figure works really well to sell the idea of a Beastman. And just overall, it popped his belt off at some point too. So, of course, the armor is all removable. I think I said that already. But the armor is all removable in very typical MOTU fashion. So all of these pieces have straps and buckles, so you can take it all off if you want to have him be more nude, less armored up. He kind of looks like a big football player here because of the big fur pads that he's got. But I think it adds to his hulking nature, and it makes him look huge. And not to say that he isn't huge, but it makes him look even bigger than he actually is. But I think details and all of the various little influences that are crammed into this one figure, I think they work in his favor quite a bit. This fur piece, it's kind of attached to this harness. It does work really well. It doesn't look too cheap or goofy in context of this figure. Like, I was worried that I wasn't going to care for this whole thing once I got it out of the box, but it works really well. And again, it beefs him up and it makes him look really, really huge and like tribal in many ways. Kind of like what they're going for on the box art for this one. We've got, all these floating armor pieces, which, some of them cinch on him a little bit better than others. This one kind of seems to want to flop around a bit, but overall, they, for the most part, sit in place really nicely. You've got our very blue loincloth, which of course works pretty well for Beastman, and it definitely breaks him up, adds a little pop of color in this very sea of orange and red kind of figure. You've got your big headdress here, which, I will say again that it does tend to fall off. Mostly when I'm not paying attention to moving him around, like it just wants to pop off. But it does look cool. It's got these spines going on it, row of teeth, a little bit of wash on it as well, and it just sort of pops on his head. It's a hat, basically. And then the head sculpt here is very typical Beastman. Like, it's kind of exactly what you think. It's very vintagey, but I also get like a 2000X look out of this one. At least that's what's coming through for me. So it's like, again, a lot of different Beast men crammed into one Beast man, if that makes any sense. My only real gripe when it comes to this head sculpt is that the teeth, the top row of teeth, are painted blue, and it seems to be a thing across the board, which I'm just not a big fan of. Otherwise, like, that's definitely that's definitely a Beastman figure, and I'm really happy with just the overall presentation here. And for the 15th time, he's really big, and that works really, really well in the context of what this guy is. Like, it makes sense, right? Now, we can take this off, and I'll show you what my other real problem is with him. And it's not one that I'm probably going to be too concerned about at the end of the day, because of, let's pop the head off just for make it easier. At the end of the day, just because he's probably going to always have the harness on, but his chest is so heavily painted with this wash and this brown color that he's two-toned. And this is not different color plastic. This is just a lot of paint. So he has a ton of this brown wash all over his torso, which I'm just not a big fan of. It's so heavy because the fur is so heavily textured. Like, there's just a ton of paint slathered on him, which works in the context of, you know, I guess a deco hit. But when it comes to doing this, I think this is a little off-putting. This is one of the reasons why I don't know that I'm ever going to have him be a naked Beastman, because when you have the armor on, it's very hard to see it, but when it's off, it's pretty obvious. So that's kind of a weird thing. I'd rather they just not painted it at all, and I could have put my own wash on it, but now I've got to worry about, if I ever go down that road, how do I get that off? Do I acetone the entire thing and see what happens, or not? So your mileage may vary on how much you care about that. I find it kind of annoying, but otherwise, the overwhelming majority of this figure looks absolutely fantastic for me. Now, of course, we have to do some size comparisons because, well, I've mentioned it, and I feel like this is the best way to go about it with the Masterverse line. So we've got the first Beastman here, which is still very much a normal figure for the line, but he's absolutely scrawny by comparison. I don't really think that there's anything between these two figures that is or even could be shared parts. It's all seemingly different. So you've got a very different style of Beastman here. And then we've got Skelegod, of course. So Skelegod is the closest kind of figure, I think, to this Beastman. You know, it's not like Triclops or Trapjaw where they have two different versions of the same character in a box. This is just a, you know, beastly Beastman that happens to have two different pieces of armor. He's deluxe because he's so big, just like Skelegod was deluxe because he is comparatively so big to all the other figures. And you can see they pretty well match up, although Beastman is definitely still gonna kind of outclass him when it comes to size. And then let's do MOTU Classics. So here's a Classics Beastman, and he looks like a little baby by comparison. And then let's do something else that is, you know, similar size scaling, but still not going to match up, I suppose, right? So here is the Super 7 Ultimates Tigra, you know, for like a baseline Ultimates kind of figure. So he looks pretty small by comparison also, and we all know that they're not. And then let's do one more completely different scale. Here is a Marvel Legends Wolverine, and Logan looks absolutely diminutive by comparison. So I think that paints a pretty solid picture, really, that this Beastman is humongous. He's very beefy. The armor adds a ton of bulk to him, but he's still a big figure, no doubt. Like, he's bigger than just about anything else in the Masterverse line so far. Now, as far as accessories goes, Beastman is still given a lot of stuff, because despite all of this armor that he comes with, which is all removable, it's, you know, it's all modular, he still has a handful of things that definitely work to, one, change him up, and just give him some classic Beastman kind of accessories. So to start with, we do get the other armor piece. So like I said, you know, take the big fur piece off, and we get this, which is definitely very reminiscent of, you know, vintage stuff. Very much reminiscent of MOTU Classics too. Like, this looks exactly like they're trying to give people, when I look at this, it makes me think that they're trying to give people who don't have MOTU Classics Beastman a way to get one without spending, you know, triple digits, because he's expensive for sure now. So this is very similar to the actual armor piece that is on that MOTU Classics Beastman. And I think it's pretty cool that they did this. And even when you have this one on, I think it still hides the super heavy discoloration on the torso, you know, because it is very brown instead of orange in many ways. I think it kind of breaks him up enough that it hides it kind of well. So you just pop it on over his head and you're good to go. We get some extra hands. So he comes with a fists and one of those just sort of style posy hands on him in the box. So you get a set of gripping hands. They also have that very heavy wash on them, but again, you know, it works pretty well in that context. We get this monster club, which looks fantastic. It is surprisingly a little clean for my taste. Like in comparison to the figure, like it needs a wash. It's brand new, factory fresh, I suppose. What's really weird is like the attention that they put into this, because all of these little spikes are different, unique pieces that have had to be attached to this thing. So I guess spared no expense in some way on that. And then you've got this little ringlet down here for its handle. But it's hefty, it's big, it's not too heavy for him to hold it, but it's got some size and some weight. And then of course we get the ever-present Beastman whip. And what's really weird, and I'm honestly surprised that they even went to this level to make this happen. This is not the same one that comes with the first Beastman. Even though his whip was really big for that size of a figure, like this is the first one. This is certainly big enough for this, but this is not the same piece. It's obviously different color, but it's an entirely different sculpt. I'm really surprised they went that route. And then of course, it still has that same cord, which I'm not the biggest fan of because it's incredibly, non-dynamic. But I suppose if they're going to have to, cut costs somewhere, this is going to be it for me. But this thing looks good. I like the color on this compared to just the flat black on the other one. But again, really surprised that they kind of went out of their way, seemingly, to give him a unique sculpt for that, because the other one would have worked just fine. So, I mean, a lot of good stuff here. And again, taken in the context of the fact that he has two distinct looks, three if you want to get him fully naked, three distinct looks in this box while also being incredibly large. There's a lot of figure and a lot of variety in this package. So yeah, overall, I think it's pretty obvious. Really, really happy with this figure. I mean, he's definitely up there for one of my favorites in the line right now. I don't think anything's going to hedge out Stinkor for me, because I still really like that guy in particular. And then, of course, the classic version of New Eternia Skeletor is still up there for me. But he's among them. He's easily one of the best figures in this line. Not just the fact that he's so big and has so many different options, but they seemingly went a little, extra on this guy, because again, a lot of unique parts, even when they didn't need to, a lot of unique parts with this figure, ton of paint on him, for better or worse, ton of paint on him, and there's really only a few minor things that I'm not the biggest fan of. I think the wash on the torso, way too heavy-handed, but again, I'm probably not going to keep him naked anyway, so it's not the hugest deal for me there. And then that blue on the teeth seems like a bit of a miss, maybe just a QC issue when it comes to painting this particular face. But otherwise, it's all kind of minimal. He's a lot of fun to play around with, and he looks hulking, and he incorporates a lot of those classic Beastman design elements that just kind of mash up into one hulking monsters figure that, frankly, is going to dominate your Masterverse shelf. So that's going to do it for this look at the Masters of the Universe Masterverse New Eternia Beastman. Let me know what you guys think. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and share, and until next time.